Do the thing with your beer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Britton's Hangout Hour, episode 20. I'm surprised we're here because for a while it's really hard to find guests. I have to tell you, but I'm here with an iconoclast of BookTube, I guess you could say. Do you mind if I use your real name?
My real name is Raphael, but it's Raf, yeah.
Oh, okay. Raphael,
Yeah.
also known as Raf Blutaxt on YouTube. Very, very fun guy. Also, beer enthusiast. How you doing, my friend?
Oh. Beer enthusiast. Well, yeah, cheers, and thanks for having me on.
I'm sorry, I like on your channel you just go like, hey guys!
Well, I did start that all the way back because I didn't know what to do with my hands while filming and stuff like that, so I started with the beer, and then it kind of became this thing that I just kept going, and everyone was like, wow, I love that kind of beer, and it's like, yeah, me too.
I know Germans are big about their beer. I've heard that. Is that a stereotype?
Yeah, well, we're big about the quantity of beer. I'm not necessarily saying our quality is that high, or it's a very unique thing. It's not as varied as it is in other countries because we have had this basic beer tradition for so long that everyone's just basically drinking the same kind of thing, but from lots of small breweries. So it still tastes kind of different depending on where you go.
But yeah, no, you're on BookTube, I guess. You certainly have a more like scholarly way of looking at it. I don't know. I'm interested in people who take the fantasy genre seriously and the science fiction genre seriously, and you definitely do that on your channel, which I appreciate. I don't know what you think about that, but
I feel, yeah, I'm doing that, and I'm trying to do it more. I think at the core of that is for me that at university I studied philosophy, and I took a bunch of classes in aesthetics, which is way more about books than just images for lots of reasons. And one thing that I've taken away from that is fiction matters, and fiction has always had the capability of influencing what we think and believe and how we see the world. Whether we, read fantasy or serious, you know what I mean, like realist fiction, it doesn't matter because it's about the attitudes and so forth. And even though we're obviously aware that elves and dwarves may not be real, we still get influenced by what we read there. So you have to take this stuff seriously because it's, though you go and so like, well, it's just escapism. It's like, no, it's not just escapism. It will influence your thoughts afterwards, so you better take it seriously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that sentiment. It's just a weird thing because, like, I was talking with Philip Chase the other day, and he's a professor of English, and I was talking with him. I was talking with him the other day, actually on this exact show about why there are certain novels that one might consider fantastic or speculative fiction, why those are taken seriously, and then there's some other novels in that same genre that aren't taken as seriously. Like, for instance, like, why is Kurt Vonnegut taken more seriously than someone like Philip K. Dick? Now, that's not to mean like I want to diss on Kurt Vonnegut. I do enjoy Vonnegut stuff that I've read anyway. I've only read Slaughterhouse-Five, but I think Philip K. Dick also has like important things to say, and that's just an example. I'm not I mean,
yeah, I think in that specific example, it really comes down to who knew whom at what point. Because from what I can see, a lot of Philip K. Dick is getting more and more seriously appreciated and taken seriously. Mm-hmm. I recently read a book on the postmodern by Frederick Jameson. It's postmodernism, or the cultural logic of late capitalism, and it's a Marxist approach, but it does look at postmodernism and its different aspects of postmodern culture, and that book does and he cites a lot of science fiction literature in general, and he does definitely also cite Vonnegut, but he does take a lot of time talking and using Philip K. Dick for as an example, and stories by Dick as an example to try to make clearer what postmodernism or what the postmodern might be. And so in academic circles, Philip K. Dick is definitely appreciated more. I feel with Vonnegut, some people early on called him postmodern literature, and that's where people started like, "Oh, I be smart. I read Vonnegut," whereas Dick was usually this literature for paranoids and people that take too much drugs.
So yeah, I've noticed you have like a show called Monthly Marxist Malcontent. So this might sound silly and me just not getting like the obvious, but like, would you call yourself a Marxist, or are you just like saying that to be like edgy and
So the whole thing is that I do like alliterations, and we had a conversation on a Discord, and someone we were talking about content creators, and someone called me a malcontent creator because I was angry about something, and that kind of stuck. Then I heard we had like the monthly malcontent, and I'm like, what could I put in there? And it is so. I very much appreciate the writings of Marx. I think everyone who's interested in economy or in economics should definitely read Marx at least once, because whether you agree with what comes afterwards and call yourself a Marxist, or whether you just read the Marxist analysis, it is one of the best analyses of how capitalism works. You get the descriptive part of Marx's theory is something that is valuable no matter what you go and do. I do see myself very much as someone politically on the left, but I would never call myself a Marxist because it sounds too much like doctrine at that point. I'm not good at adhering to doctrine. So
I was going to ask if that were the case. Have you read like China Mieville's stuff before? Like,
I have, and he very much calls himself a Marxist. Yes.
Like, have you read his Baz Leg series?
I have read I've read Purdue Street Station. I haven't read The Scar and Iron Council. I know they're even more down that road. I've read The Kraken, and I've read The City and the City. I've read what's it called? Embassy Town, and
read Embassy Town. Later.
Embassy Town is brilliant. It's a very, very interesting, very philosophical take on language and truth and stuff like that. I really liked it. I've read his Last Days of New Paris, which was weird, and I did read some of his non-fiction
that's a lot of
on.
Yeah,
I've read a lot of China Mieville.
Oh, okay. I was just curious because I know he's I know he's more hard left, and he does write. Now, I mean, now I'm not saying like he does have like left themes in his work, in some of them.
Yeah.
Like, Purdue Street Station does have like some like left stuff in there. That sounds bad, but it sounded really badly worded. But I really love Purdue Street Station. I think it's a very, very good novel.
Yeah, I think there's some aspect to what Mieville does. I mean, he's done like some nonfiction stuff on the Russian Revolution, and last year he released the A Spectre Haunting Europe, which was his sort of introduction explanation kind of text on the Communist Manifesto, which is a really, really helpful book if you want to ever get like a primer to the Communist Manifesto. It works really well. And what happens is that if you read and come from like a leftist, or in this case more politically old school Marxist, whatever leftist perspective, what happens is that you see certain aspects of society and are more sensitive to those, like the economic dynamics that keep some people on the margins of society, and so make sure that some other people get all the money, and how that leads to all kinds of societal dynamics. You're a bit more sensitive to those, and that will come through in your writings no matter what you do, and that will influence
we all have our interests,
the worlds you build, and that's definitely something that you can see with Mieville in a way.
Yeah, he certainly, and I've covered him a few times on my channel because I think he is someone who is I don't know if I want to say he's underrated. He is kind of. I think he is, but there might be some people, he does have a following. For sure.
I think he's once again someone that gets quoted and talked about on the more academic side of fantasy discourse. Definitely, when you read books on fantasy and on science fiction, Miebel gets mentioned a lot more than, say, Brandon Sanderson, for example. He's interesting in that regard. He's a bit like one of those like authors where you have like writers that other writers get heavily influenced by. Roger Zelazny is one of those people. Like you look at like fantasy authors. They're all like, well, we love the Chronicles of Amber. And then you go and talk to, your average fantasy reader, and they've never heard of Zelazny. And
he is getting more covered on, like, BookTube now, which I'm glad. But, it's just kind of... I have also been one of those people who've covered him, because I'm like... Yeah. I try to go for, like, the more, like, underrated books that don't get, like, covered so much. As much as, like... I mean, there's the stuff that's good, and I think is, are popular for a reason,
Oh yeah, I mean, I think the part that kind of like discourse on the internet gets somewhat foreshortened because there's a lot of this is generational break, and people that read fantasy from the 60s and 70s and possibly even partly the 80s, they don't hang out on social media, or not the same kind of social media that a lot of book discourse happens these days, whether that's Twitter or Instagram or YouTube or discourse. They don't hang out there, so there's this weird break where people that read that other stuff don't talk with the younger generation that is slowly sometimes making their way backwards from current releases to towards older releases, or just read current releases and new releases. Publishing works in the way book discourse works is that you want to talk about the new shiny thing because that will probably get you more views, and that will lead to... So it's incentivized to talk about upcoming releases because more people profit from that than, you're talking about Chronicles of Amber, which have been out there forever, and most people will probably just go and buy a used book. And so the other side is definitely... the system is rigged in a way that it does sort of support that discourse when it goes. It's weighed toward newer releases in a way.
I mean, I don't know if you've like heard of or I'm sure maybe you've heard of this because you've been sort of in the because you said you went to college. You've been through the academic. I like to view like good literature as almost like a conversation, that there are authors present who are, or at least the really good ones anyway, that respond to the ones of the past. Like, if you want to go back a little bit, like Milton.
That is, in fact...
Like, Blake was responding to Milton, and, like, Milton was responding to, like, the Greeks, and you go down, like, Moorcock was responding to Tolkien, and, Tolkien was responding to yada yada, But that's kind of how I like to... I'm really fascinated by that kind of idea, I guess. And I don't see it talked about very much, which is disappointing.
There's like two sides to that. Like, in general, artists have always responded to other artists. That's just something that has always happened. That's how art works. Art has always been like an ongoing conversation. Sometimes it's people purposefully doing the opposite of what is currently in favor or whatever. But it's very much a conversation, an ongoing conversation. And then there's like a second element to that, which is that with the start of what you might call modern literature, in like the beginning of the 19th century, what happens there is that mostly in Germany, but it takes over from the German Romantics relatively quickly to the English Romantics, and from there on, all over the place, was the idea that it is explicitly a discourse. So you write fiction, but within that fiction, you also do literary discourse and do literary criticism of other texts. And when you go and read, some of the 20th century literary criticism, that stuff is very, very, has almost flowery prose. Go and read someone like Northrop Frye. That's certainly not exactly, it's not dry academic is what I mean. Same for like some of the French guys, like Roland Barthes or whatever. They're not exactly just writing down theories with like logic, symbolic logic in it. And then there's the third part, which is that parts of fantasy and science fiction for a long time took place in magazines, and a lot of people were first writing letters to these magazines and showed up in the letter columns, and later on they started being writers in those, getting published in those magazines, and maybe some of them ended up actually getting novels published later on as well. So there has been that conversation of writers with each other around what they're doing as writing as fantasy authors. That's something that adds like another layer to how that conversation in fantasy has always been very well, almost turned inwards towards the genre and the same people, which maybe has made it a bit more difficult for outsiders to break into fantasy, or people from within fantasy to sort of break out of fantasy into like other genres, because it has always been this sort of clique kind of thing, all the way back from, say, the Weird Tales times with Clark Ashton Smith, and
I actually have one of his. I actually have his Penguin book. I haven't read it yet because I'm more. I'm a mood reader.
Smith is brilliant, but yeah, sure. Clark Ashton Smith is really powerful if you like very flowery prose on macabre themes. But.
The way I view prose is kind of like, I like good storytelling, and like prose is like that, like added bonus, I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'll admit, prose can make or break a book, is what I've noticed over the years, at least for me. Because if it doesn't flow well, then I'm just like, this is fucking stupid. Why am I reading this,
Yeah. Smith has a very distinct style, but he was friends with Robert E. Howard, like the Conan author, and and they both were friends with H.P. Lovecraft.
Howard because there's a raw intensity in his work that has never
very
fully
much
been replicated. Like there's some have come close, like Joe Abercrombie, in my opinion anyway, but none have ever surpassed him.
I think there's a very important difference between what Howard does and what Abercrombie does, and I'm not talking about like the intensity of battle scenes, which Abercrombie gets, and that is the sort of existential angst that is in Howard. You can like there's a lot of like the distance between Robert E. Howard, the writer, and his writing is very, very small, especially when part of the letters that he wrote to Smith and Lovecraft, and we have all these long letters with all kinds of weird stuff that they're talking about. There's a lot of that in there. Abercrombie is a fairly happy person with like a settled personal life and stuff. There's this like ironic distance between Abercrombie and what happens to his characters, and I think that's the difference between those two. And that's what makes Howard stuff so difficult to replicate, unless you're also fairly miserable as a person, I guess.
Well, I mean, Howard for me is one of the bigger tragedies of fantasy literature because he took his life at such a young age, and just really sad, and I think another one who is like a giant, but at the same time not so many people have not covered him. If I remember, I saw like a conversation you had who has covered Robert E. Howard. But Howard definitely is one of, in my opinion, fantasy's best writers. My favorite pulp writer, anyway. He is.
Yeah, he's certainly the one that have had like the biggest influence on me because I read him relatively young, and reading Howard when you're 15 is very, very, very strong poison.
I didn't read him till I was around. I didn't fully actually read his work till I was about 20, and I was very surprised by how good it was. Because I was expecting it to be kind of cheesy, And there is certainly the melodramatic stuff, but it's not like super tacky or anything.
No, and then you go and read stuff like Black River and what's the other one? Red Nails and some of the later stuff. And you're like, whoa.
That he's trying to create anyway.
Yeah. I definitely agree. Like Howard is one of the giants of what made fantasy, and a lot of people kind of in a lot of like discourse go like, well, it's basically Tolkien, and you're like, you're missing like a huge part of fantasy if you think it's Tolkien. Even Tolkien read Conan. We know that, and he liked it.
or so Elsprog de Camp says. I don't know, but I like that. But my point I was trying to make about the sort of conversation in literature is that you're one of the few people I've seen in like fantasy booktube who's actually covered that idea of literature as like a conversation between different authors. And fantasy is no different. I mean, Howard even took from like old, like he took from like Shakespeare and old.
A lot of Arthur Machen is in there.
And Celtic myth and because apparently he was Irish and very proud of it. Norse mythology, of course, Franz Giant's Daughter, which is my favorite Conan story so far.
Yeah. That conversation part, I think it's important to understand, and a lot of people kind of ignore that, or not ignore, or are unaware of how that conversation goes between these authors, or maybe just ignore parts of the conversation or leave some participants of that conversation out. And you're like, there's more than just Tolkien. There's also more than just Robert E. Howard. There's the more comedic tradition of people like Jack Vance and Fritz Lieber, where you're like, yeah, that has had a huge impact on the fantasy genre. And when those, those were definitely people that had a huge impact.
Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser at some point.
Oh yeah, they're very funny. Not all of them have aged well. There's certainly like a way of I don't want to even call it a male gaze, because there's a level of self awareness in there that makes it less sexist. It's still extremely sexist, but it's sort of this weird, like, old man kind of sexism. It's weird to describe. They're still definitely worthwhile reading, and there's some brilliant stuff in there. But that's like things like Robert E. It's what's his name? Fritz Lieber invented the Thieves Guild, in more or less. And we know that people like Gary Gygax read Fritz Lieber and loved him. And there's a Thieves Guild in just about every single D&D adventure somewhere. And a lot of people that played D&D then went back and started writing fantasy books, and suddenly we have Thieves Guild all over the place.
It's funny how that echoes throughout the. I think it's interesting. There's some people who might just think of it as, oh, that's kind of boring, and I don't know. I've always been interested in that. Come on.
I'll put it this way. I think it's one way to just read. You can read any book without any context. It's always possible to read a book without context, and that's totally fine. Knowing more context may give you different ways of appreciating a text, may add to your enjoyment, but they're not necessary. You don't need to know any of that stuff, but once you do, you can get more out of a text.
Yeah, no.
That sort of,
Excuse me. But yeah, I mean, you see it in like genres I enjoy: science fiction and crime fiction, and I mean, Philip K. Dick was kind of pulling from like Jungian psychology and just also just the weirdness of his own imagination, and he was probably mentally ill. The New Wave was kind of a response to the, kind of more idea-driven science fiction of, like, Clarke and Heinlein and Asimov.
Yeah.
I just think that's really interesting how those connect,
Yeah, you can definitely see that in science fiction, probably even more, because you have even more of these, like, distinct waves acting and reacting with each other. There's
hello? Oh dear. Seems like we've paused.
You're aware of it, and you read Neuromancer again, you're like, oh, that's where these weird, like, almost stream of consciousness kind of descriptions come from. That's very much more like On the Road or Naked Lunch than Arthur C. Clarke. In a lot of ways.
I mean, I know Moorcock is sort of the kind of leader of that, I guess. I don't know, but he's another author who isn't like he's becoming more covered, but it's interesting he's not as covered because his impact on fantasy is also very large.
Yeah. What is it? You just cut out for a second and I didn't hear you there.
Oh, I just said Moorcock is interesting because...
Oh yeah, Moorcock.
He's also not covered as much. Wish he was. Though that's starting to change a little bit, which I'm happy.
Yeah, the new Elric edition that they started bringing out last year, I think that helped to put him back on the table, sort of, for a lot of people. I mean, Moorcock has had this weird underground thing because he was always an angry political writer.
Yeah. Always taking pot shots at Tolkien. I'm like, dude. There's sometimes I'm just like, dude, this is just getting petty. At least in my opinion.
Well, to be fair, I feel like a lot of people misread the Epic Pooh essay because yes, he's taking punches at Tolkien, and they are justified up to a point. But he's railing against like a greater system there. He's at the time he was editor of a magazine. He was trying to do progressive things, literary progressive things, not politically. It's like, yeah, I'll put J.G. Ballard in there. People that are considered literary fiction by now. He was trying to innovate basically, and people just wanted to read more sort of Shannara, and they're just like super frustrated about that. Mm-hmm. So I think that's something that you need to that helps understand his punches at Tolkien. He's not punching at Tolkien. He's like, look, Tolkien ain't the best, and y'all are just out there copying Tolkien without really understanding what he does, and that sucks. So he's more attacking Tolkien to attack the people that are copying Tolkien, in a way.
I've sort of noticed over the last couple years that it seems like fantasy is not really so. It's a bit more downplayed now because like fantasy sort of become more of a diverse thing, I guess. But there's not. But there is like there seems to like we're not really sure how to move on from Tolkien. It seems to me. I don't know.
Yeah. So there has been. I think there's like several reasons why that is the case, or how those things connect. One of them is, of course, that Tolkien, for reasons, was really, really popular, or got really popular in the 60s. And then, people like Ballantyne with their adult fantasy series kind of, once they actually started getting new books published, instead of just republishing 1920s novels that are far more diverse than anything that came afterwards, started ordering stuff like sort of Shannara and stuff like that. That kind of made the Tolkien thing its own sort of like brand. And I would almost say like Tolkien is his own theme, and it's like Tolkien fantasy is its own genre. It's sort of taken for fantasy, but it's not necessarily fantasy. It's just like has had like this huge like it has cast its shadow over fantasy. And I think it's changing.
Yeah, I agree.
People are rediscovering other stuff. Also because of not only self-publishing, but fantasy is getting more global, more diverse. And Tolkien, as much as I love Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion and the Hobbit, Tolkien has a very, very he does something very distinct, which is trying to recreate a form of mythology. Not recreate, but create some mythology that works as a mythology for England.
He said that he wanted to make his own British mythology.
Yeah, that he does say that, but he does say that in.
That. I don't.
Yes, there's a quote, sort of about that, but the point in that quote that usually gets ignored is he does not say like, I want to create a mythology that all of England should follow now. It was more like, I want to create that got lost. Like Tolkien was very attached to a very specific rural, late 19th century part of England, close to Manchester where he lived, that kind of stuff. And he has like this ideal England in his mind, and he wanted to create a mythology that would fit that ideal England. It's not like, look, from now on, I want all Brits to tell each other tales of Fëanor at the campfire. That's not the goal there. It was more like to have a mythology that fit that specific landscape, those specific people, because Tolkien was influenced by Herder, the German philosopher, linguist, and so forth of the 18th century, who came up with that idea that like language and environment and a national character and mythology are all, connected to each other, and something that has had a huge impact on 19th century romanticism. But we know that Tolkien was sympathetic to these ideas that language and mythology and the landscape, like the actual environment, they all play together and create this one thing. And that's why Tolkien's mythology is so much tied to his languages that he came up with, and those are once again all tied to those parts of rural England that he was missing. So that's what he means when he talks about a mythology for England. And people kind of ignore that aspect and just so, yeah, he wanted to create a mythology for England. It's like, no. He wanted to create a mythology for an idealized England.
It's like Robin Hood and
yeah.
And King Arthur.
Well, it's King Arthur.
Yeah, no, hilariously, I don't love a lot of King Arthur. I find a lot of it's just kind of, oh yeah, let's go out there and, give him the daring do, whatever. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. I did see the Green Knight movie a few years ago. Loved it.
I mean, the interesting thing about King Arthur, and I've recently made like a short video on the subject.
Oh yeah, I saw it mentioned you're making some like weird Arthurian like video monster videos.
Yeah, it's almost 4 hours long.
Oh my god. How did you manage to do that?
Over weeks and weeks and weeks. And the interesting thing about Arthurian mythology is that Arthurian legends got invented as a political fantasy in the 12th century. And then
were they like propaganda?
They were real propaganda back in the day. And then they were taken up by the French, and they added their own bits, and then for like 1,000 years, like ever since like the 12th century, people have been adding to those Arthurian tales and have turned them into whatever they needed for their propaganda whenever they were right. And that's what makes Arthur so interesting, because they're exactly that kind of thing, a mythology written for England, but one with no basis whatsoever, like an artificially created Arthurian legend.
That's interesting.
And that makes them interesting. You can do whatever you want with Arthur at this point.
Yeah, no, I guess this is not really my thing, but there's some I enjoy, like of course Gawain and Gawain and the Green Knight. I like that story. I love the movie that they made a few years ago.
I haven't seen the movie, but I've read Tolkien's version of the poem. Like he edited like a version of the Gawain and the Green Knight story.
Oh, I got the new version. I'm hoping to read it this December because it's a Christmas story technically. Or it is now. They can't make up their minds on if Arthur's Christian or not.
Well, Arthur definitely is Christian. Like, the author of the legends has always been Christian before 20th century people decided to do something with him. That's the point, because he was written in a thoroughly Christianized 12th century England, and then adapted in a even more Christianized 12th and 13th century France. And that's that. The idea that there is a non-Christian author stems from a few hagiographies, which are saints' lives written in the 10th and 11th century, where King Arthur is mentioned, who is more like a one of those like nature spirits, larger than life kind of hero kings that usually comes along, does something really stupid, and then the saint has to pray and either convert Arthur to becoming a Christian or do something else that gets this. So he's more like a foil to the saint in those saint biographies. That's the non-Christian version of Arthur that we find. And then obviously with neo-paganism being a thing in like from the 1960s onwards, we get all these, Arthur wasn't really a Christian kind of thing. Marion Zimmer Bradley with The Mists of Avalon is one version of that. Bernard Cornwell with his Warlord Chronicles is another version of that.
Yeah,
but
I haven't
people
read Marion Bradley. I don't think I want to, because just
no, trust me, you don't.
Oh, is it bad? Because
it is not very good. No.
I wasn't gonna read it for like personal reasons.
Oh yeah. Look, there's obviously all the terrible things she did as a person, so that's a valid reason not to read the book. Although her publisher is donating, or her estate is donating, all the money made from those books to charities that help survivors of domestic abuse. So that's nice.
Even
but
worse,
beyond that,
her
it's
daughter's
just
turned into a homophobic nut job because of that stuff she did.
Yeah. I have avoided reading that book of hers.
That's kind of why I don't. That's why I'm not gonna read her, because her damage is just the damage she caused is just, it still kind of echoes now.
Yeah, look, that's a good reason not to read the books. I will not say anything against it. I read it because of the author video as like research, but it's also not very, very good. Not exactly a gripping read. It's also extremely long.
Oh God. I suppose I like fantasy, or I guess like fantasy is like your favorite genre, or like speculative fiction in general is your favorite genre. Or
sort of, I guess, like fantasy, science fiction. I mean, I usually see those two as more or less one larger genre, where I'm like, yeah, this is fantasy, science fiction. It used to be one genre all the way up to like the 70s, when people decided to market it to different people, and I'm like, it doesn't make any sense. It's basically still sort of the same kind of broader genre. I do like those. I do read some literary fiction, definitely, when it gets to like the more like postmodern weird stuff.
I saw you did like a video about Marlon James's brief history
of seven killings. Yeah, that one, for example.
Have you read Black Leopard, Red Wolf from him? Because I thought that was an excellent novel.
I have not yet, because I wanted to wait for the third book in the trilogy to be at least, have like a firm release date, so I can read the entire thing in one go.
So good.
Because I like to binge read series, so I want to wait for the third one, because
that's fair.
I expect it to be out like next year. So like, I'll just wait until it's, until I go and do all three.
I gotta read this now. So,
I did really enjoy Brief History of Seven Killings. That was a fantastic novel.
I do hope to read. I have it up here. I don't want to pull it out, but yeah, I've read. I started the Gentleman Bastards series this year. I've enjoyed that. I read the Vorrh, which that was interesting.
Yeah, that one's an absolute trip.
Yeah, no, I had a friend of mine, we did a buddy read of it on his channel, and he was just like 60% of it is like, what the hell is this? I'm like, I don't know, man, this is weird. But I didn't
really like the whole thing. I did enjoy the entire Vorrh trilogy. I did also really appreciate Hollow, which was Catling's last novel, because sadly he passed away last year. And where he does attack, but like looks at certain parts of Flemish paintings, like Hieronymus Bosch and people like that, Bruegel the Elder, and kind of turns that into a fantasy world, which is as obscene as you can imagine will be if you're basing it on.
I saw you covered Hollow. Is it any good, or were you just kind of like?
No, I absolutely loved it. I absolutely loved it, but it is. I mean, you've read Vorrh, you know what you're getting yourself into. The
Vorrh is just fucking weird. And I was like, what the fuck?
Did you read the entire thing, or just did you read the entire trilogy, or just the first book?
I have the entire trilogy. I've just read the first book so far. I do hope to read the other two at some point, because I was just so... It was a weird thing. I don't know if I'd call it an enjoyable read, but I was just so fascinated by it. I'm like... Alright, I do hope to read Hollow sometime.
I mean, have you looked at Catling's like art? I mean, he used to be a professor of art, contemporary art at, I keep forgetting whether it's Oxford. Like,
I've seen some of
he used to be
he really likes Cyclopses. I've seen some of the Cyclops paintings.
And I think part of what he does is trying to find a way with words to portray images that he would create with either sculpture or paintings as well. So there's a lot of like, I don't want to say it's synesthesia, but he's definitely using language to recreate other sensory impressions. And I think that's a very important part of what he does with his books. And since he likes really macabre stuff, his books end up being really macabre in a lot of ways.
There's a lot of banging in that book.
Yeah.
A lot of dicks. I'm like, Jesus, there's man. There's like a dog sex dream in the Vorrh. I'm like, what the fuck?
He does go into these details. It's definitely part of what he does as an artist and as a writer in that regard. And there's certainly like a level of like surrealism in there, how things turn from one thing into another, and there's sort of symbolism about colonialism, definitely heavily in the Vorrh when you talk about like
I kind of
how the country is sort of
as like a book about. It reminded me a lot of another African book, which is so strange. I could say it's almost fantastical. Heart of Darkness.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially when he describes the Vorrh as like there's this beating heart of the jungle. There is a Heart of Darkness vibe to it. I would agree.
There's sort of this like theme I know because I saw your thing of the Hollow. It's called Art as Revelation, I think is what it said.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, so I went into the Vorrh thinking of that, and I noticed it's about. Well, for me, it's about people who are trifling with something they shouldn't be trifling with.
Yeah.
And eventually are punished in some way for it.
There's certainly that.
Now, I don't know why Edward Muybridge was in the Vorrh. There's a lot of things I still don't understand about the Vorrh, but...
there's William Blake's in the Vorrh.
Oh, he is. I love William Blake. He's another one I'm like, man... No one has used any of his ideas. Like, he was doing, like, weird fantasy shit way before any of, like, no one's taken his ideas and, like, implemented them. Like, come on, guys. Like, he's got stuff. You can modernize this.
Well, I mean, he's, like, Blake has done some amazing stuff, especially... Blake was so far ahead of his time, because a lot of what Blake does is, like, turn his views of like the human psyche into like a mythology and fantasy. Like, you have the different Urizen and all those people being different facets of like the human psyche. And then people like Jung and Freud come along and have a huge impact on fantasy writers who then take those ideas of Jung and Freud and turn them back again into mythology. You're like, yeah, but you know what? Blake did all of that like a century ago.
Yeah, no, I remember Alan Moore in an interview. He's like, people didn't know what the hell he was talking about till, like, now.
Well, they still don't know. They've just gotten better at explaining their bafflement.
But no, William Blake's I've heard he's in the second book, I think. Which that's interesting.
Yeah, he's in the second book.
I do definitely hope to read the rest of the trilogy at some point, but I read that first one. I'm like, I'm gonna reread this again because there is a bunch of shit I probably did not get in this. So, they're also like heavily, referencing all kinds of other stuff. So there's definitely that part with it. There's ideas of like how mythologies create, how the country can fight back during colonialism, how there's that weird, like, how thin the veneer of civilization is, or how thin the veneer of like humanity actually is, which once again, ties in with what you see with Conrad in Hard Darkness, of course. Yeah, I noticed, like, when you said art as revelation, I noticed in the Vorrh that most of the characters are searching for like some sort of transcendence or knowledge that can't be found in our world, but possibly could be found in the Vorrh. I mean, I don't know. I'm probably, I don't know, but... Yeah,
I mean, you could also go and read the concept of the Vorrh as this specific part of the forest, basically. You could read that as a metaphor for the subconscious, right? Or the the collective subconscious, if you wanted to.
Yeah, no.
I mean, it's
yeah.
full of monsters, and you go there, you'll come back changed.
No, I mean there's like a dog sex dream in this. I'm like, what is this? You know, I mean, I'm not a prude, but it's like, what? Oh man, I don't envy being his editor. I bet he was just looking at it like, Brian, baby, what is this? I bet he was just like trying to explain it, and I'm like, I don't fucking know. Okay, we'll just. Here you go. Here's the changes.
I think that's the advantage of being a professor or a professor emeritus at this point. Same as Tolkien. You can get away with a lot of stuff with your editors because you're a professor, and they might not be, willing to actually challenge you on details there.
That's fair. I mean, I do admit I do kind of regret making my friend reading it through, but I didn't want to read it by myself because I was like, oh man. And then he was like, dude, I don't know. This might be too weird. I'm like, it's fine. I was just curious what you would think about it. And
I did really enjoy. Not enjoy is the wrong word. I did really appreciate the Vorrh, because I think that's the other part. It's like it does something that you might call more like modernist art or high art in like a way that Adorno would call it. It's like Catling's pushing boundaries. He's constantly pushing boundaries. He's taking you out of your comfort zone in ways that just adding more blood and gore would not. He's trying to, break like genre boundaries and just see what's possible within.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned in my written review of the Vorrh that he's not really he's trying to capture an experience.
Yeah.
Or he's trying to make you feel something. Or
yeah.
I don't know how to describe it. It's hard to describe. I mean, I'm definitely hoping to cover the Vorrh at some point, but I'm like, oh boy, how am I going to cover that? And plus, who has read this aside from my friend Jason? And if I had my friend Jason on, we'd just be bickering about it the whole time.
Well, Alan Moore wrote like the introductions for like the foreword for like all 3 editions, 3 books, I think. So certainly found one person who really liked it.
Well, that's actually how I found it, is because I'm a big admirer of Alan Moore's work. And, he wrote this weird introduction. I'm like, ooh, this sounds interesting. And I read it, I'm like, what the hell is this? But I'm on your boat, though. I really appreciated it. I do think it's one of the most singular, like, visions of fantasy I've seen since, like, Perdido Street Station and, like, American Gods, or like Black Leopard, Red Wolf, for instance. But but even it's like it differentiates itself from those 3 in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. But it's unique, and it's certainly something that will mark you.
Yeah.
You cannot escape reading
read that book. Like, I really dove in. I'm like, what the? Okay, all right.
The book, just like the forest itself, will not leave you unscathed. You will emerge a different person afterwards.
Yeah, no, I remember I was kind of, because my buddy, I've done a couple of discussions with him, but my friend and I just have different views on the guy I read the Vorrh with. We kind of have different views on like how like storytelling, because for me, it's kind of like a puzzle, I guess, and for him, he's more about like the experience, I guess. I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain, but
yeah, I've not watched much of what Jason does on his channel. I've seen him not being happy with Malazan. I can tell you that.
Oh yeah, I'm talking about Jason Furman. Yeah, he's a good guy. Yeah. I enjoy talking with him.
Oh yeah, I'm just disagreeing with him on the Malazan stuff.
Oh, I mean, I haven't read Malazan. I'm kind of intimidated by that series, personally speaking.
I would say you don't have to be. It's one of those things that annoys me. People are always like, "Oh, Malazan is so difficult." It's like, it's not difficult. You can make it difficult.
Kind of like
you didn't have to.
Time, I'm like, I don't know if I want to dive into this 15-book series. Like, yeah.
I would say read the 10 books, the 10 Malazan books, and ignore the Wheel of Time. Speaking as someone who has read both, but I might be biased. I think the Wheel of Time is just terrible. It's all around terrible. It has a few really good ideas that get like trodden under the just sheer amount of just badness that's in there. But I know a lot of people love the books. I just disagree with them.
Yeah, no,
Also, it's a misogynistic hellscape, and people claiming those are strong female characters have well, they have no idea, and they're just wrong, objectively wrong. These are not strong female characters, and I could prove it with logic and facts.
But no, but yeah, no, I know Malazan's sort of like it's very popular, but at the same time, like, it's sort of a take it or leave it experience I've seen. I've known some people who've bounced right off of it, and then I know some people who are like, this is peak fantasy right here. I'm like, now I don't know what I'll fall on, but, you know, maybe someday.
I would say, but you know, if you find like Gardens of the Moon somewhere for cheap, just give it a try and see whether you like it or not. There's like, there's no pressure. I think it does very interesting things with fantasy, which is usually what I appreciate about books, when they actually do something with the genre and try to do new things with it and so forth. That's something I like. One important thing, however, that I always say is like, don't try to understand it. There's like this tendency with a lot of modern fantasy of the, you know, already like Wheel of Time, but definitely stuff like Brandon Sanderson and so forth. Probably, I would say it's connected to the computer game generation in a way, where we expect worlds to be finite, and where we expect that there is a definitive answer to anything that we might want to ask of the world. That we can click on every fucking pixel in that world and get a reaction, and that leads to a lot of people trying to understand everything that happens in a text, word by word. It's like, if I don't know anything, if I haven't understood anything in chapter 1, if there's still open questions, then that's a bad book. And Malazan is not that kind of world. It will not explain. You can just ignore all the things you're not getting and just follow, you know, the story, and that'll be enough. But don't try to answer all open questions at day 1. It won't work. That'll drive you mad.
Fair enough. But yeah, no, I know Jason's just like, just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. And I'm like, yeah, well, you know, no books for everyone, right? And I'm like, I know he likes Mark Lawrence, which is funny. I'm friends with him on my Facebook, but we had an interesting conversation once, and I don't know, it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. So we kind of like I've been kind of hesitant to pick up his books since then, because I'm afraid like that experience will just mar my viewing or my reading of his books.
I've only read his first trilogy, and I think it's terrible.
Oh, you don't like it? You're not
like he's got a way with words. He's very good at style. I'll give him that. I just think that the Prince of Thorns series trilogy, the first one, Broken Empire, is edgy in a stupid way without making an actual point about it. And I think that's like the largest issue that I have with it. It's just like 16-year-old edginess. It's like, yeah, I'll start my book with my 14-year-old main character raping 2 children and making jokes about it.
Yeah. For real?
I'm like, yeah, what's the point?
Yeah, but it's like a Clockwork Orange in a fantasy setting. I'm like, interesting.
No, it's not, because Clockwork Orange does actually have points. Like, Clockwork Orange has a point to make about society and about character, and the Broken Empire doesn't.
No, I mean, I know you made a video called Grimdark Should Die, like, or something like Grimdark Should Die.
Yeah, yeah, that one.
or something
That
like
wasn't
that.
so much about the genre. It was one more about the term grimdark that I didn't like, because I think most people using the term grimdark are using it in all the wrong ways to make points that are stupid.
Um, I don't know what you think of like Joe Abercrombie. I know you talked about him a little bit on your channel.
I've read all the First Law novels. I haven't read the Sharp Ends short story collection.
Oh,
I think Joe Abercrombie is a phenomenal writer. He knows how to write books. I
oh,
disagree with his worldview or the worldview he portrays in some of his books. I think there's stuff, especially in the first trilogy, that is really bad.
like what? I'm curious.
Well, I mean, there's on the one hand, there's the handling of the queen. What's her name? I keep forgetting her name.
Oh, the one
The
who's
whole handling.
the one who's a lesbian. You mean?
Yeah, that part is just handled really badly. And Abercrombie has spoken about it afterwards. Like,
Yeah, if I remember, he
that
was
wasn't
like, yeah, that wasn't my greatest moment.
so yeah, there's certainly that. I do have personally, I've had issues with the way he portrays Glokta, or at least the disability part of Glokta. I do have issues with that, but they are probably very personal. And there's some other stuff in there, like the way he just. I see what he's trying to do with the Gurkish, but it doesn't work because it like. You could go and try to read the Gurkish as a criticism of Orientalism, because the Union is very much colonialist England in a lot of ways, and I get all of that. But it does. There's no real break there where you can, because you don't get any like actual Gurkish viewpoint characters, so. It comes across as very Orientalist and very Islamophobic. He does remedy a lot of that in the second trilogy, though, when you have mostly like refugees from there because the country was like broken up. He does do these things a lot better, and also the whole like representation of queerness and so forth. It works much better in the second trilogy. And Abercrombie has grown as a writer immensely.
What I think is interesting is, have you seen The Wire? I don't know if you watch it.
I have not watched it. I'm aware of it, but I haven't watched it.
Oh, well, I was gonna say like the First Law kind of is like the fantasy version of that, sort of, because it deals with similar themes about like the system and the institutions that people are in, and how we can't really change them, really, or how we can't really change society. There's some of that.
Yeah. I have this one issue, which is that Abercrombie doesn't make it a systematic thing, and that's he falls into the trap of structural anti-Semitism there, because at the end of the day, it's all Baez's fault because he's manipulating everyone.
I don't think Baez was meant to be Jewish, though. Did you say anti-Semitism?
I said structural. I said structural anti-Semitism, which means that it's analog. It's an analog. Baez is not Jewish, but he's the one who controls the bank, who controls the government.
I didn't take it as like subliminally anti-Jewish, but
Well, that's exactly the point. Like the difference is that as long as you go like, well, the banks control control governments and control the entire economy and so forth. Yeah, sure, that's real. But as soon as you go, it's like, but there's one evil genius behind the banks that actually pulls the strings of the banks. That's where you tread on very dangerous ground, because that's sort of like what structural anti-Semitism means, is that it's you replicate that structure. You need a concrete scapegoat behind the system, instead of just going like, well, the system's fucked, so maybe we should change the system, because the solution, once you have like the evil guy behind the banks, the solution is, well, let's get rid of the evil guy and everything will be fine. But that's not how that works, because there is no evil guy behind the system. There is just a system. And that's sort of like a dangerous thing he kind of unfortunately plays into somewhat.
I mean, I disagree with some of your points, but I see where you're coming from.
Have you read the entire trilogy, second trilogy as well?
I have not read the second trilogy.
Ah, okay. It's more emphasized in the second trilogy, and has like one scene almost at the end where it describes a vision or a dream, and the image he describes there is very, 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 very close indeed to very specific Nazi anti-Semitic caricatures that you can look up. And I'm like, don't do that, man. Just don't.
No, I imagine if you asked Joe Abercrombie this, he'd probably be like, "What are you talking about?" Or maybe
yeah. I'm not claiming he does this on purpose. That's not my point. I'm not claiming he's doing this on purpose. I'm just saying he's fallen into that trap because it's something that is sort of connected to a lot of well, at least Western history of the last couple of centuries. Well, actually, like the last 2 millennia, if we're honest. So it's very easy to fall down that trap in a lot of ways. And I'm just like, it's easy to ignore it, and then suddenly you end up with something that you didn't actually mean to say.
But like, what are some like other fantasy that you enjoy and have covered on your channel? Because I haven't seen like all of your videos, but one of the things
I've definitely done a lot of Malazan stuff. Yes, I've critically covered the Wheel of Time.
Yeah. I know you. I've seen like some videos. I've seen your Epic Poo one, which I enjoyed because not a lot of people cover that.
Yeah.
I saw your Kings of the Wild one, which I actually I actually have it up here. I want to try that at some point, but
oh yeah, sure, go ahead.
Thank you for your permission, sir. But,
it was meant as encouragement. Go read it.
No, I
know a lot of people. I know a lot of people enjoy it. I know a lot of people have really a lot of fun with it. So I hope you do.
It's definitely like I know Philip Chase is putting out his trilogy. Are you going to cover that when he puts out the book?
Yeah.
He puts it out. He puts them all out in September when they're all out.
Yeah, I'll definitely read them, and I'll see whether I'll do reviews or what I'll do with them, because I'm not a huge fan of reviews. I know they help sell books in a way, but
no, I mean like
I'll definitely talk about it.
No, like what you usually do, just like your kind of analysis.
I'll definitely do something about it. Don't worry about it. I want to read them. I haven't read them yet. I'll definitely read them, and I'll definitely talk about them, and we'll see where that goes. I've done a lot of Discworld stuff on my channel, and I think at this point, Discworld is probably one of my top 3 fantasies if I'd ever rank them. So Terry Pratchett's up there. Glenn Cook's Black Company is one that I really, really love. Yeah, the whole Fafhrd and Grey Mouse stuff by Fritz Leiber, and Conan, Jack Vance's Dying Earth, and Leoness. That kind of stuff, definitely. And with newer authors, I do appreciate almost everything that Lavi Tidar writes. I do really, really enjoy the things that N.K. Jemisin does. That kind of stuff. Those are sort of where I think the future of fantasy or genre fiction currently lies, is with people like Jemisin, people like Cameron Hurley, people like Catherine Valente. That's because those are people that try to move the genre into new avenues and trying to try out new things.
Her over there. I hope to read that at some point. I don't know
which one,
but we'll see. But yeah, I know you've covered like Chronicles of Amber and
yeah, I love
which
it.
I want to read. I've heard that's a really good one. Zelazny's one I've wanted to try for a long time.
Yeah, Chronicles of Amber is definitely worth reading. I think that the first 5 books are slightly stronger than the second 5 books.
All right.
They're like 2 generations. Like the first 5 are the books of Corvin, and the second 5 are the books of Merlin, who is Corvin's son. No relation to Arthur Merlin.
Yeah, I've also seen you do like some videos about like the shadow of the past, anti-Semitism and fantasy, and
Yeah.
you have a bit of a interest. I know there's a lot of people or I've known there's some people who've kind of talked about racist stereotypes in fantasy, which I think is interesting. But at the same time, I do sometimes think that people kind of look too deeply into it, if that makes sense. I don't know.
I don't know. I think there's like two ways to do that. And I think the orcs bad, Tolkien racist way of doing it is missing the point. There is racism in Tolkien. There's a lot of racism in Tolkien. But it's not necessarily about him hating orcs. There are, elements of that when you go and find out that he said, like, yeah, boy, I want the orcs to look mongoloid, which that is, I'm quoting him. I'm quoting him. He's like, yeah, the orcs should be
I'm like, it makes me wince, and then I'm just like, oh god,
yeah.
Oh,
well, I mean,
man.
He's writing in the 30s. People were using that word at the time, and he definitely just So there is racism in the orcs, but Tolkien's racism is far more in how he describes like the different human nations and how all the people from the east and the south that are all dark skinned and they're all the evil guys because they fell for the Dark Lord, and that's way more of an issue than the orcs, I think, with Tolkien. Plus the general way his world is, built up, which is like everyone belongs into their own place, and the Rohirrim go to Rohan, and that's where they belong, and the Gondor people, they belong to Gondor, and there's a lot of like, I don't want to say ethno-nationalism, but it goes down that path, because that's sort of like the more like mythic thing that he tries to recreate.
I'm looking at your thumbnails. I really like the Terminator one.
Those thumbnails are made by my buddy John, who's currently we've known each other for a long time and played some D&D together, and got very drunk at heavy metal festivals together, stuff like that, and we share a lot of like the same kind of humor and ideas. So, yeah.
Fucking just the old Arnie. It's good. I like that.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking through your channel right now, just seeing. But yeah, no. Crosswords of Twilight. Is that a Wheel of Time book?
Crossroads of Twilight is still another, like the 9th or 10th one.
Oh, geez, you read the whole series?
I read all 14. I did not read New Spring, which is the prequel one.
Oh, yeah, I know you. Not a big like Sanderson guy from what I've never read Sanderson, and in all honesty, I'm kind of
people are mistaken there. So I've read the Mistborn of Era 1 trilogy, and I've read Mistborn. I read Alloy of Law a long time ago. And while there's certainly stuff that I disagree with and so forth, well, that's not my point. My criticism of Sanderson so far has only been about the way he markets his books and the way he acts as, a media figure. That's where my issue with Sanderson lie. Like the way he announced his like Year of Sanderson Kickstarter, that kind of stuff. I have not criticized his books because I would have to go back and reread them, because when I read Mistborn, that's over a decade ago. I will not just tell anyone how bad Mistborn is from like my 10-year-old memories. That's not how it works.
Them, or did you not really?
I did enjoy Alloy of Law far more than I did enjoy the first trilogy. I was entertained, and there's a lot of things in like the way he creates his world that I disagree with, or like his world building has implications that I find troubling. But so yeah, that's why I'm not like saying anything about Sanderson's books at the moment, because I just can't judge the quality of his books. My issues with Brandon Sanderson are merely the way he's he's marketing himself and the way he's acting online. That's where my issues lie. For now.
Admittedly,
I will say this: I've bought audiobooks of the first all the Stormlight Archives books that are out so far. I have them all, and I will read them once the 5th one comes out, because that's sort of like when the first arc of the series is supposed to be done, and then I'll just read the whole first arc in one go and say what they say. And then I'll talk about it, and then I'll be angry. But until then, proven, innocent until proven guilty. That's sort of like how I approach Sanderson's books.
Fair enough. I mean, I personally have I'd feel like a bad fantasy fan if I never like read them at all. But there's like that little contrarian part of me when I'm like, oh, maybe you should check out Brandon Sanderson, and then there's that little voice. It's like, no, so I don't do it. Mistborn's the only one that actually sounds interesting because I'm intrigued by the concept of it. His other ones just seem like, those big chunker fantasies I'm not really interested in.
Yeah, I mean, Mistborn, like, one of the problems, let's say, what I will say about Mistborn is, Mistborn, or what Sanderson wrote in Mistborn, are, in theory, heist novels.
Oh. Well, if they're heist novels, I can just read the Lies of Locke Lamora again, or the other Gentleman Bastard books again.
Yeah.
Those are really good.
Like, the issue with, like, heist novels, the way Sanderson sets up his books, at least in Mistborn, is that he gives you a very complicated and interesting magic system and stuff like that. And then he gives you a problem, and then you, as the reader, can try to figure out how the characters will solve that problem, which is sort of the puzzle side, which makes heists in general like interesting subjects, whether it's like your Ocean's 11 or your Mistborns or whatever. It's that like idea that all the things have been there all the time, and you, as the reader, can try to actually solve the problem before the characters do it. And then you feel vindicated when they do the same thing you did. But the problem with that is that I'd rather just take his like sort of cool magic system and play my own games and write my own stories than just follow his people, because I've already figured out the puzzle at that point. So what do I get from his characters doing the same thing if they're not exactly the most compelling characters to follow? And that's sort of where the issue with Sanderson lies, because at least in Mistborn, his characters aren't that compelling.
Well, that's
and his dialogue isn't that good and stuff like that. So it's more like, the problem's cool, but once I figure it out, I'm like, yeah, well, whatever.
Yeah, no, I tend to like fantasy that sort of, as I like to say, I like the fantasy that challenges my view of what fantasy could be. So, Perdido Street Station, Black Leopard, Red Wolf, American Gods, The Scar to a lesser extent. I think you would like The Scar if you like.
Oh, I'm pretty sure I will. It's more like a matter of time until I read it. It's more like too many books.
Did I say American Gods?
Yes, you did.
Oh, the Vorrh. Though the Vorrh is kind of interesting because I don't know if I love it, but it's one that I really respect in a lot of ways.
It's a book that'll make you think, and that will stick in your mind. That's something that can't be said for every fantasy book.
I will ask you, since you've clearly you've probably thought about this a lot more than me, but why was Muybridge in the Vorrh? Like, do you know, or do you have like a theory?
No, it's also been like 5 years since I read those books, so.
Oh, never mind then. Maybe I'll ask someone else at some point, but.
You can ask me when I reread them and actually do videos about it.
Well.
Until then, I would need to remember.
Fair enough. But yeah, no, there's some. But yeah, I do want to read Hollow at some point later this summer, maybe next month.
Yeah.
But I've heard it's more accessible than the Vorrh. But
it's more accessible and it's shorter.
Yeah, I know. I felt bad after I made him read the Vorrh, and I'm like, shit. I should have gone with Hollow first because it's shorter.
It is that.
It is that.
Yeah, I feel like. Yeah, I like to be challenged in books. I think that's definitely something.
But I like storytelling as well. Like, it's weird what I want in books, because there's so many different things you want.
Yeah, well, that's why you mood read. Sometimes you just want to get told a cool story, and sometimes you want to wrestle with a book and just figure it out.
Exactly. I know you've read some Cormac McCarthy. It's sort of the same thing
I have.
with him. You're just kind of like I noticed there's like trends on like fantasy YouTube where people like there's some who are reading manga and there's some who are reading like McCarthy for whatever reason. I think it is fascinating to see the people who try McCarthy for the first time because he has such an acquired taste, and he also recently passed away, which made me very sad.
It was sad, but it wasn't really unexpected, right? It's like,
well, yeah,
people in the 89 years old, rest in peace, man. But went out with a bang with like 2 brilliant novels last year. So it's like, what more do you want?
I mean, yeah, I still need to read those, by the way.
They're good. They're sad, but they're good.
I do want to read. I'm leaning on reading Suttree next from him. I know it's a Southern.
I haven't read that one, but that's probably like the most autobiographical one, right? That's very much
what
like
I've heard,
his.
Yeah. What McCarthy have you read aside from? Have you read anything else aside from The Passenger and Stella Maris or?
I've read The Road, Blood Meridian, and No Country for Old Men.
Oh, what did you think of them?
I did most appreciate No Country for Blood Meridian is the one that I mostly love. That not love is wrong, but or sounds wrong. Blood Meridian had the biggest impact on me. I think a lot of people start with The Road, and The Road was like a while ago when The Road came out. A lot of fantasy people were like, "Whoa, The Road is brilliant and so depressing," and they're like, "You guys heard of Blood Meridian?" That's a whole nother level.
I've what's interesting about The Road is that it's actually it's actually a story about like perseverance. Like, it's not all bleak. Wow, Blood Meridian.
No, I mean, it's about sacrifice and stuff like that, but it kind of ends positive, right? With the kid actually getting to hang out with this new community and becoming maybe forging a new future. There is hope in The Road. Mm-hmm. I mean, hope for a McCarthy novel. We're not talking like, anything concrete, but there is a sort of optimism there.
Yeah.
Blood Meridian doesn't have any of that.
Oh, no, it doesn't. Oh, God.
And neither does No Country for Old Men, mostly.
I view No Country as a very disillusioned story.
Yeah.
Especially
I think it's
the disillusionment that comes from being older.
Yeah, very much that. And I think what also makes it so depressing is, compared to most other McCarthy novels, it feels contemporary.
Yeah.
Right? The rest is like, the Wild West was actually really bad. And you're like, yeah, I kind of knew that. I
I had a feeling.
Yeah, exactly. And then you go and it's like, well, turns out today ain't better at all. So that's sort of like what makes No Country for Old Men feel so bleak, is that it's McCarthy taking all the things that he's done with like his older, like his stuff that is set in the past or whatever, and just takes it into like basically today and goes like, well, actually the same stuff's still the same thing. Nothing changes.
Yeah, I know. It's No Country is a very downbeat novel. It's really sad.
It might also be one of the closest adaptations I've ever seen as a movie.
Oh my gosh, yeah, movie's amazing. It's still my favorite McCarthy adaptation because it's just.
It is because it is so very, very close to the original and still manages to work as a movie.
Yeah, it was originally a screenplay, apparently.
Yeah, well, makes sense.
But yeah, no, I've only read The Road, Blood Meridian, No Country, All the Pretty Horses, The Sunset Limited, which is a play he did, and Child of God, which I want to read again because I don't know if I got that one. It's probably my least favorite of his work so far, though.
I've heard it's probably even darker because it's about that serial killer guy, right?
Oh, it's probably one of his nastiest books that he's written, aside from like Blood Meridian.
Yeah.
It's vile, nasty, and depraved.
Yeah.
But it's more like you treated this guy like shit, so now he's become like an animal type of story. While Blood Meridian's just like, here's how evil and depraved human beings can become, I think Blood Meridian is probably like his most like dense, easily his magnum opus, if you ask me. I think so anyway.
Yeah, might be. I think it mostly sort of encompasses like his grand theory, so to speak, like which is very much that, you know, if humans lose like meaning, like spiritual meaning, what happens is that we turn back into animals, and probably extremely nasty animals at that, because we'll just like go and kill anything that we come across. And I think that's very that's like a big theme with McCarthy, is like that in a more secular like world, like in a world where like spiritual meaning, like religious meaning, is no longer like something you can count on. It's like, what kind of meaning do we actually find? What kind of meaning do we try to find to actually avoid us falling back into that darkness and becoming that monstrosity? And Blood Meridian just plays that out. It's like, yeah, you have all these people, they have nothing to live by except maybe making money. So
like,
what do you expect them to do?
And like kidnapping kids and like shooting people. I'm just like, good God, you know, it's very tough to take at points because there's so much going on. Even though it's pretty straightforward as a story, it's like they wrote on, you know, like
And it is based, you know, the Glanton gang stuff is historical, at least in part. He does obviously, you know, exaggerate and give us all the gruesome details and invents the judge, but there's historical basis there, and I think that's very much what McCarthy does. Like, you know, when you compare him, say, to Thomas Pynchon, Pynchon always looks at these points where humanity had the chance to do better, and then the machine or the system came and took it over again, which is why he has so much stuff set in like the 60s, before Nixon comes and just you know, fucks it all up, and these kind of like breaking points in human history. Whereas McCarthy looks at people that have no like inner guidance and are left to just materialism and possibly extreme situations and what will happen then. Which is why The Road is so hopeful, because the dad does have some form of guidance. They have like something they're working towards, which is in this case just, you know, going south because there might be something there, but they have a goal. The other characters don't have actually goals. They just like drift, or the goal is just like stay alive, and that's not enough. And I think that recognition that it's not enough to just stay alive or make a lot of money, that's not enough. We're looking for something else. We're looking for meaning in life. And in modernity, like since you know, in our current day, there's no clear meaning left. And that's sort of the thing that McCarthy wrestled with in his novels most of the time, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. But yeah, I do find Blood Meridian to be probably his most thematically complex book. Because there's so many like different things going on. It's almost like, you know, like there's references like Heart of Darkness and like Moby Dick and Paradise Lost. It's just so much stuff going on in that.
Yeah, but those are books that also wrestled with those same themes in a lot of ways, right? I mean, Heart of Darkness does wrestle with that.
Though. Like, no. He's like,
maybe
it's my favorite
it's one of those
novel. I'm
things.
like, oh man.
I've read Moby Dick as an adult once, and I was impressed. I was really impressed by Moby Dick.
Yeah, it's one I'd like to read again at some point because I read it when I was younger.
I think it's one of those things that suffers from being read in high school.
Yeah, it's one of those books I read when I was younger, and I was like, I don't know if I get it. You know, maybe I'll read it again and see if I like, you know, if I have like a better appreciation for it. Now, Heart of Darkness.
Yeah, definitely.
When I was in middle school, I was like reading a bunch of classic books, at the time, and I loved it. I think it's
Yeah, but Heart of Darkness is also very straightforward. Moby Dick does so much weird stuff on the side.
Well, it's interesting because Heart of Darkness has like this weird, surreal, like it's almost like you're in a different place. You know, you're not even on Earth.
Yeah.
At least that's how.
Yeah, but you don't get like an entire chapter just as like an encyclopedia entry. You don't get like another chapter written as a drama with like actual stage advice and stuff like that. You don't get all these weird things that happen in Moby Dick.
Yeah, no, there's like one chapter in Moby Dick where they're like beating off a whale to get like the fucking stuff out of it so they can make wax.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah. Like Moby Dick's a weird book. I'm not taking that away.
Yeah, no, it's a. I know McCarthy has said he liked Moby Dick, like it's his favorite book, and I'm like, dude, more power to you. I don't know. Again, maybe I'll read it at some point, and perhaps.
Yeah, but that makes sense. That does explain a lot about McCarthy because it's a weird book. It's also full of like weird biblical language, and it's also about the search for meaning that you never ever find, because once they find that whale, it'll just take you down.
Yeah.
Or so I've heard.
I thought you read it though.
Yeah, of course I did.
Why'd you say so I heard?
Yeah. No, I read it, and the way it ends, like with Ishmael just like surviving, holding on to Queequeg's coffin. I'm like, someone survived because it's holding on to the coffin. That's a very McCarthy ending right there.
Yeah. It's funny about Blood Meridian is that it was actually the final line that really sold me. Or, well, not the final line because there's like an epilogue, but I mean like, you know, Judge never sleeps, he'll never die. You know, that really impacted me.
Yeah.
Like
no, I think it's like Blood Meridian is a brilliant novel, and it's yeah, I've read it a bunch of times by now, but it's like it always hits me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like, do you think like the Judge is like the devil, or do you think he's like some personification of violence? I mean, I think you could make any other argument. Or
yeah, I don't think he's the like Christian devil, but he's certainly a supernatural like personification of evil in some form or other.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah.
Also, he likes to hang out naked a lot.
He fucking loves getting naked, man. I'm like,
I know.
Yeah, every like couple of chapters, he's like dancing around bare naked. I'm like, what the fuck is he doing? Yeah, but even when he does like weird shit like that, you're always like kind of like turned off. Like you're just like, what the fuck is he doing? Like that's creepy.
Well, he's not supposed to be an attractive character in any way, right?
Well, no. He's described as like a giant infant almost. So you're like, well, that's freaky. It's like he's taking something that's usually like beautiful and just makes it ugly.
That's definitely part of McCarthy's talent.
Have you ever seen Passion of the Christ? There's this scene where the devil shows up and is looking at Jesus. It's holding this like fucking like old baby, and you're just like, oh my god, what is that? It's so, oh god.
I have not seen that movie, but yeah,
it's a really wild movie. But no, it's it kind of makes me think of that that weird devil baby, whatever the hell that was. I'm like, oh god, you know.
Yeah. You ever read Thomas Pynchon?
Alas, I have not. I have friends who have, and they're always telling me go read them, and I'm like, I do want to. I just haven't gotten around to it. Like Alan Moore. I don't know if you've read Alan Moore, but I know Alan Moore is a fan of his. Paul Thomas Anderson, one of my favorite filmmakers, made an adaptation of one of his books, Inherent Vice.
The Inherent Vice movie, right?
Yes.
The only one that anyone ever made.
I heard he can be very dense, and I don't know where to start with his work. Though I've gotten some recommendations about pension.
I would probably say start if you already watched the Inherent Vice movie. I would say just read that book.
I haven't
because it's probably the most straightforward one that he wrote.
I haven't seen the movie, but I do want to read that book because I do like noir like that, and I've heard it's kind of like a weird take on that genre.
It is that, and it is fairly straightforward compared to most other Pynchon. So it's still dense. It still has like way too many references to obscure stuff. But because it is a noir detective story, the main plot is at least, there. Which can't be said for most other novels that he wrote. Like,
why are they just like incoherent?
No, not necessarily incoherent, but they're usually sort of these mosaics when you have like a lot of stuff happening, and sort of after a while maybe meaning coalesces out of all the weirdness, or maybe it doesn't, depending on like how you feel about it, sort of, which makes at least like the big ones like Gravity's Rainbow or Against the Day somewhat tough to read because they're weird.
Fair.
Mason and Dixon is also fairly okay, I would say, and Crying of Lot 49 does have the advantage of being really short. But I think, like, as an entry point, I would just say go with Inherent Vice. It's probably the tamest and the easiest to get into. Because he does a lot of like this more like postmodern stuff where weird shit happens and you have like long lists of weird shit happening and references to all kinds of other weirdness that you don't need to actually pay attention to, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And Inherent Vice works well, and it does have a point, and it is a noir story, and it's got the vibe, like the slightly melancholic vibe of like the 60s ending, the 70s starting, what I said earlier, that moment where like something that could have been good has been, corrupted by the system again, and Nixon comes into power, and actual developers take over all the like hippie occupied stuff, and all the stuff that was stolen from the natives and so forth, and how that point that maybe the counterculture had, and how the option of becoming a better humanity was once again not taken. That's sort of like the big theme of Pynchon, is always these like weird points where we had a chance and we just once again blew it.
Might have to read him because I know he's been Harold Bloom in one of his before he passed on. He talked about, he said McCarthy, Pynchon,
Don DeLillo,
Don DeLillo, who I haven't read as well, and Philip Roth, who I have read and don't like, are the 4 best living American novels at that time anyway. 2 of them are dead now.
Now, I tend to disagree with Harold Bloom on other things, but yeah, I think there's certainly some of the most unique or in that way important American authors. Yes, it's kind of telling that obviously white guy Harold Bloom does choose these specific 4 white people. Also, I would have probably exchanged Philip Root for David Foster Wallace, although I don't know whether Foster Wallace was already dead at the time.
David Foster Wallace is another one I've read. Don't know where to start, though. I'm kind of intimidated by Infinite Jest, because that book just... I've heard it just fucking goes everywhere. I'm like, what? Oh.
It does go into a lot of weird places, yes. Maybe just start with some of his essay short story collections and go from there.
That's what some friends of mine have told me.
I don't know. Start with Consider the Lobster or something like that.
But yeah, in terms of like mainstream American literature, like I've read some Philip Roth, and I'm not a fan of his stuff. A lot of it is just, oh no, like I read The Plot Against America, didn't like it. I thought it's too dry, and plus it was too angsty. And I like angsty stuff, but it angsted too much for my.
Yeah.
It has a lot of that, like, Woody Allen kind of, oh no, that kind of, like, angst, and you're just like...
Look, as a German...
I don't want to say Jewish angst, because that sounds bad, but...
Well, I have to defend German angst here, but...
It did get a point across that Charles Lindbergh was an awful human being.
That's true. And a virulent anti-Semite, too.
Yes.
The kidnapping of his baby was still, like, absolutely terrible.
Oh, no, of course, yeah. No, that's terrible. But at the same time, bad guy.
Yeah. No, Charles Lindbergh was a terrible person.
Or at least, I probably wouldn't hang out with the guy if he,
No.
I wouldn't talk. I mean, he literally downplayed some of the shit the Nazis were doing. Like, that's unforgivable.
Oh yeah, he was very much a Nazi sympathizer and anti-Semite, in the most explicit way possible at the time. So, yeah,
that kind of loses sympathy because no one likes Nazis.
What can I say?
I was about to say, well, I say that, and I mean, I'm sure you don't like
No. Look.
It's a blight on my country. I mean, I'm sure Germans hate Nazis the most. I don't know. They're the ones that make it look.
I mean, we do have our own like neo-Nazi scene. Don't get me wrong, but there's certainly maybe at least in parts there's more awareness of it, I would say. Certainly our school system does not shy away from talking about the whole like Third Reich and what happened and how it happened and so forth. It's certainly something that we try to make clear in education in a way that not every other country does, work about. Try to understand its past atrocities to make sure they don't happen again. And that's definitely part of like German, at least like state, like national like identity or reason is like, the usual like state reason. Part of that is to make sure that does never happen again. Once again, we have a lot of like neo-Nazis. We do have our anti-Semites and so forth, but the idea is still fairly common sense that we should probably avoid having another Holocaust.
Well, yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, Holocaust is not cool. Don't do that.
Yeah. Speaking as someone from Germany, I can tell you, no, it doesn't even pay off.
I don't know. I guess there's something that kind of disgusts me about people blaming others for their own problems. It's like, I think that's something that disgusts a lot of people. But then again, there's sort of a dark human nature to that as well. It's kind of a thing human beings do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's it's difficult to talk about the whole subject in like in a short-term form, right? But what is important to understand is that while the Nazis did kill a lot of people, the way there's a difference between just Holocaust and Shoah, which is the genocide of the Jews, because Nazis did kill, gay people. They killed Sinti, Romani, people with disability. They killed a lot of people, but there's like an additional dimension to the genocide of Jews in that. And there's a historical reason why that happened. That is in part particular to German history, but it's only in part particular to that. And well, let's just say one of the biggest proponents of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion was one Henry Ford.
Oh God. Yeah. 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 There's a lot of things my nation has done that I'm not proud of.
Well, I mean, he may or may not have been tricked into that, but he did. Like Henry Ford did publish the Protocols in English in America and distributed with all the power of the Ford company behind it, and yeah. So the problem is that stuff is still out there and it's still virulent in a way. So making it just a German problem does.
Well, I mean, I know it's not really just a German problem. It's just you guys kind of took it too far.
No. So well, yeah.
You guys
I mean, definitely
kind of acted on it, and yeah, that wasn't.
I think
good.
the important part for me is to take the lesson from that.
Well, yeah, of course.
That people have bad ideas, but it's very it can happen way too quickly that people with something where we just like, yeah, we disagree with those people, but we won't do anything about it, and suddenly those people are in charge, and it's very easy to fall in line with them, and actually, once they're in power, that I think is like the big lesson to be learned from that. It's not like Nazis exist. It's more like once they take power, there's a larger number of people that will just follow than you might actually believe. And there's all kinds of, reasons why that happens, all kinds of pressure they can exude and so forth, but it will happen. So you need to make very, very sure that those people will never actually even get close to, reaching power, because once they're there, it's basically over.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's but to cut back to what we were talking about,
yeah.
Not a fan of Philip Roth.
Yeah, so I've gathered.
Can't believe.
Have you read? Have you read?
Fond of Philip Roth turned into a talk about the Holocaust and.
No. Have you read Michael Chabon?
Yes, and funnily enough, I'm actually reading The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay right now.
Fantastic book. I love it.
I've just, like I said, I've been sick the last couple of days, so I haven't really found the time to read it, but I am reading it. I read his Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser type of book that he did,
Gentleman of the Road.
That's another one I want to reread, because I don't know if I was in the proper mood to read it. But I was kind of thrown off by it. Again, that's one I'd like to try again.
I loved it. I really had a lot of fun with it. But then again, I've read a lot of Fafhrd and Grey Mouser, and I'm like, yeah, this is cool.
Then again, the art from Jerry Gianni didn't hurt, so I really like his style. I love his artwork.
Yeah,
he really captures that pulpy style. So
yeah.
He also did the art for but dang it, stupid chair! He did the art for the Solomon Kane copy I have here.
Nice.
Yeah, very good.
Is that the Del Rey edition of Solomon Kane?
The Del Rey version, which is.
Oh yeah, when they did the Solomon Kane, Cull, Bram McMorran, and Cormac, the Conan ones, and yeah. That was probably the best, Robert E. Howard edition that was affordable.
Yeah, no, I got them because apparently, it's Robert E. Howard. That's not it's his work. It's all the stuff he wrote.
Yeah.
Unedited, not what DeCamp and Carter did. Kind of messed with his work.
Yeah, these are just the original texts, basically.
Yep.
In publication order with all the additional stuff.
But isn't Michael Chabon also Jewish?
Chabon is Jewish, yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Which is he writes a lot about
Jewish. I forgot about that.
He's also written the Yiddish Policeman's Union.
That's another one I'm curious to read because
I love it. It's a fantastic book. Like Chabon does. So I think that's an interesting aspect. Chabon does capture like a very American sense of Jewishness because, like, you know, being a Jew in America is very different from being a Jew in Europe or being a Jew in Israel. Those are very different things, and people from outside of that tend to just like conflate those and like, oh, they're all Jews. Like, no. There's cultural differences that you might want to actually take into account.
Or are you just like
I'm not Jewish, no.
Oh, you're not Jewish? Are you a
No, I'm not.
Are you just like a supporter of the Jewish or something? I don't know.
I am not.
Is anti-Semitic? Is that
it? Well, no. So first of all, yes, I'm very much anti-Semitism.
Okay.
I am not Jewish. I am certainly a supporter of you know, anyone living their life and their religion. When it comes to politics about, say, Israel, I will not say anything about that for yeah, I don't think anyone from outside does have like enough perspective to make any like actual prescriptive claims on that mess.
I know you're a fan of metal. I could tell from your hairstyle that you're probably a fan of, and your shirt as well.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Before we get into that, I did ask, have you read any of Alan Moore's stuff? Do you read like comics at all?
I have not. No, I have not. I'm aware of it, but I have not.
Oh, okay. Anyway, but to the music, you like metal, and in fact,
I do.
You said we couldn't do this on Wednesday because you're going to a concert tomorrow.
Yes.
I'm
going to see Iron Maiden tomorrow.
Iron Maiden, that's right.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of what they call metal fantasy out there. What do you think of that? Do you kind of sneer at that, or do you think like that's an actual thing? I'm curious what you think about that.
That's an interesting thing. So heavy metal and fantasy have like had like a very long history together. Like hard rock and, you know, all the way back from Michael Moorcock writing songs and lyrics and stuff for Hawkwind concerts, and going on tour with Hawkwind, and a lot of 70s bands having Frank Frazetta covers, like the usual Frank Frazetta covers that we know from Conan and stuff like that. There's always been that like connection between those two. I don't think that having your fantasy influenced by heavy metal music does make it into better fantasy. It's like, well, a lot of the jokes in, say, Kings of the Wild did fall flat for me is exactly because of that, in a way. I do see that there's like overlaps in the aesthetics. I'm not sure if that's actually a good thing, because a lot of the stuff that overlaps is very much the sort of like more simplistically the strong outlaw man guy will actually fight all the degeneracy and survive. That outlaw mystique kind of thing that does carry a lot of like weird connotations with it, and that's
when I hear
often unfortunate.
Now I just think of like some of the right-wing circles I ran in for a while. I wasn't a Nazi or anything, so
yeah, those people love that as well.
Don't be concerned. I was not a Nazi, but
no.
I did meet some people who were borderline Nazi, which I'm like, okay, fuck that. I ran away from that with a fucking hurry.
Yeah, I think like there's certainly like parts of the metal scene that do have like very much like a very right-wing problem. That's very much a problem that we have with the metal scene. There might be a similar problem with fantasy. It's kind of harder to say, although there's people like Larry Correa and people like that I won't touch. Um,
Heard of him.
and of course, like people like Vox Day, but they're more like in the the sci-fi. Yeah. Calling back to what happened to the daughter of Marion Zimmer Bradley. But I think that's part of like the danger, because a lot of fantasy, a lot of science fiction, but a lot of fantasy even more, and a lot of heavy metal does offer these like very specifically simple answers of like one strong person doing a great like apocalyptic act of violence to defeat all the evil and usher in this new golden age kind of thing. That's a theme that you see a lot in fantasy, that you see a lot in heavy metal, and that's a theme that fascists kind of vibe with.
Well,
it's part of the definition.
I just ask because I just find that kind of funny, and I know you're a heavy metal guy. I like rock music, but I'm more into like blues rock and like progressive stuff. Like I'm a big Pink Floyd fan, for instance.
I'm more on the Jethro Tull side of things, but yeah, I get it.
I still need to listen to those guys, but yeah, no, I like I like Metallica. That might be called like normie metal, but I like Metallica.
Yeah.
Some of their stuff in the '80s was pretty great.
Yeah. I think what's important is that, like, for a lot of people, like, there's like two parts of like them.
Or do you think they're kind of normie metal?
Metallica obviously have become very much mainstream, but that's hard to avoid once you become popular. You know what I mean? And
but like, do you like their music, or is it just not for you? Or
I've never been much of a Metallica fan, but it doesn't matter whether we're talking about the 80s stuff that everyone is like, well, this is cool. I just have like a personal issue that I personally just really don't. Now, this is an intuitive thing. I just can't get along with James Hetfield's voice.
Oh.
It's more like an intuitive thing. It's like he starts to sing and my... You know how some voices just grate on you?
Yeah, no, I get that. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I get it. Probably different strokes. I mean, I don't mind it personally, but
No, it's just like a very, very specifically intuitive thing. It's some voices just grate on you. There's nothing you can do about it, nothing the other person can do about it. It's just like...
Have you ever listened to Rush?
I have listened to Rush a lot. I've even seen Rush live.
Oh, I'm so envious.
Yeah.
I can tell from my set back here. Neil Peart really inspired me to take up drumming. I haven't played in a while, but man, I was sad when I heard he passed away. I did.
Me too.
I've seen some of their live shows on like YouTube, and looked like they put on a hell of a show, for sure.
Yeah, Rush live shows were really insane. I saw them twice, and it was brilliant. And yeah.
Well,
Neil Peart, definitely.
I thought of that because I know Geddy Lee's voice is an acquired taste for some people.
Yeah, but that's exactly my point. It's not about an acquired taste. Some things just don't work. Like, a lot of people love James Hetfield's voice. I don't know. I can't describe it. It just never worked for me.
Wait, do you not like Geddy
but I still,
voice, or do you not mind it, or do you not mind Geddy Lee's voice, or
no? Of course not.
Oh, okay. I mean, I guess you don't because you went to their concert.
Look at some of the stuff I'm listening to. 80s metal vocals can go very, very high indeed.
I was like Motorhead as well. I like some of their stuff. Have you listened to Motorhead?
Yeah, of course. That's like one of those funny things, right? Like that Lemmy from Motorhead was still in Hawkwind when Michael Moorcock of Elric fame was writing stuff for Hawkwind.
Oh,
so
yeah?
There's connections there. Yeah, Michael Moorcock was doing live poetry performances and stuff with Hawkwind, and when Lemmy from Motorhead was still playing bass in Hawkwind, there's overlap there.
Oh wow, that's. I did hear that him and like Lemmy knew each other.
Yeah.
Even though
Hawkwind has an album called Warrior at the Edge of Time.
Even though I fucking hate Razor Fist, I watched his video about Motorhead, and he mentioned that him and Michael Moorcock knew each other. I don't know if you've ever watched Razor Fist. I wouldn't recommend his channel, but
I think I watched one of his videos. I wasn't a fan.
Well, sir, you are you have much stronger tolerance, or, well, maybe, I don't blame you. I don't like his stuff.
Look, I've read all 14 books of Wheel of Time. I think I can stand one Razor Fist video.
I mean, I haven't read Wheel of Time, so it's one of those things. I don't think it's like Brandon Sanderson. I don't know if it would be for me, though. You know, I just, because when I read fantasy, I look for something deeper, and from what I've heard about like Brandon Sanderson and Robert Jordan, I don't think they really have that. From what I could tell, I could be wrong, of course. I don't want to. I have a bad habit of figuring it out for myself, of course, but.
I think like Robert Jordan started out with some really cool ideas, and then things got like off the rails really soon, and then it just went all over the place. But the first, like, Eye of the World is not a bad novel. It's basically what if Robert E. Howard would try to write Lord of the Rings? That's sort of what you get from the first one. So the style, the way he writes his prose, is way more Robert E. Howard. But the themes, the elements are very much Tolkien.
I've heard he did some Conan stuff before he did.
Yeah, he wrote some Conan stuff before, so he knows he does know the Robert E. Howard style in a way, and you can tell the way he just like builds up his prose. It's more like this like 30s, lots of adjectives in like a sentence kind of style that you get from like Howard and Lovecraft and people like that, and he does that in the beginning, and then there's plot points, however, in the first novel that are just clear rip-offs from Lord of the Rings, so it's a weird experience.
Yeah, I've heard it's like
you're basically getting Conan the Hobbit and
Conan the Hobbit.
minus all the sexuality and minus all the wine guzzling.
Have you I don't know if you have Goodreads, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
Have you ever come across J.G. Keeley's stuff on Goodreads?
No, I haven't.
Huh. Okay. Thought you might be.
I'm not a good Goodreads user though, because I.
Yeah, no.
I sometimes forget to log stuff, and yeah.
Maybe I'll send it to you later, and you can like check it out or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
But no, I was just curious because he has some interesting views on fantasy, and I thought maybe you'd be interested.
Yeah.
Might not agree with some of his takes. He's not like I know you like Gene Wolfe, and he does not. I actually read a Gene Wolfe called The Land Across. I didn't like it that much.
That one is weird, though. I mean,
there's like a muddy hand. That's like the one thing I remember from that book. I'm like, what
The Land Across is a very weird book. It kind of reminds me a bit of what Channing Mayville does in The City and the City. But it's not your typical Gene Wolfe of like the big Gene Wolfe books. It's like the Wizard Knight stuff. It's not like that. It's
I've had some friends
it's
who are
contemporary
like,
weird.
Try his books, The New Sun, you fucking bitch. And I'm like, dude, okay, all right. I don't want to write him off just because I didn't like The Land Across, but that one just kind of that one rubbed me the wrong way.
Book of the New Sun is a very, very different experience. I can't promise you that you'll like it. I'll just say it's a very, very different, weird experience.
Fair enough. I've heard it be called science fantasy, science fiction, fantasy. All
yeah.
Of the above.
Yeah, but you don't need the categories. It's a very interesting adventure, and it does. You can read it as fantasy, you can read it as science fiction, and you can just don't care, and it'll do all of that. You can read it as like a Catholic allegory, and it will still work.
Yeah, I know, he was a big Catholic.
Yeah, Wolfe is very conservative and very Catholic, and that does come up in his book, so that can rub you the wrong way if that's a problem. But
I'm not anti-Catholic or anything, so
I would say like the Book of the New Sun does some very interesting, or like very incredibly well done things when it comes to how how Wolf does build reader expectation and control reader expectation and then subvert reader expectation.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's just like very, very well done.
Try at some point. I'm not against trying it. It's just after the Land Across, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna wait a minute before I try him again. Cause,
yeah.
You know,
I get that. I would say Land Across is not very
Land
typical
Across,
for
I did not like
Wolf.
it. I'm like, and I read it right after American Gods, which was I thought was amazing. But you know, it's just like, dude,
Well, Land Across is sort of like the paranoid post-Soviet version of American Gods, and you're like, well, everything's dirty, and there might still be some strong men.
I love
or maybe he's a vampire, or my father, or who knows.
And there's like for some reason I remember there was like a hand. I think it was like a muddy hand, some kind of hand, but there was a hand in it.
Yeah,
and it was killing people. I'm like, what is this book? What did I get myself into?
Well, I mean, it's Gene Wolfe. He does do weird things.
I know he's been praised by like Neil Gaiman, Ursula K. Le Guin, other people.
Yeah.
China Mieville, I think, likes him.
I think it's once again one of these authors that just never cared about anything. It's like did his very, very unique own thing. I think that comes across in a lot of ways. Also, he started writing fairly late in his life, right?
Well,
Gene Wolfe started writing fairly late in his life because he was like an actual engineer with a degree and worked. He had like several patents to his name.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah. Apparently it's his face on the Pringles logo because he invented the machine for stamping out Pringles chips.
Seriously? Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
I saw him. I've seen a picture of him with this like big droopy mustache, and then I saw like an interview with him, and it was gone. I was like, "What the fuck? Where's the mustache?"
Yeah. Well, but I mean, you know the mustache. You know the mustache from the Pringles, right?
Yeah, it made me think of like Wilford Brimley. Have you ever seen the diabetes stuff? I don't know if you know that in like Germany. No. All right. Or even if you even know who that is.
No, I don't.
He's the guy from he's in The Thing. He plays one of the scientists. He's the scientist.
Oh, it's been ages.
Well, I've had you here for 2 hours. I like to at least so I'll ask you one more thing before we go, and then
yeah, it's like 2:30 at this point.
Oh no. Well, okay. I don't want to keep you for too much longer now. What are you planning on covering, or what would you like to cover at some point on your channel? Are there some?
Well, the next thing I'll definitely cover will be The Culture by Ian M. Banks. I've read those before, and I think they're still vastly underappreciated.
Excuse me.
That's definitely something I'll definitely go for relatively soon. Beyond that, I might be doing like a reread of the early Tad Williams Austin Art stuff, the Land was Memory Sorrow Thorn. Because the last one of his final Austin Art trilogy will be coming out. He always does like trilogies in 4 books or something like that. But that one will be coming out in November, so I'll definitely go and do like a reread of those because that's been forever since I read Memory Sorrow Thorn.
Like, out of interest, would you be like, are you wanting to cover like China Mieville on your channel at some point? Because
definitely. It's one of those things I read most of like the Mieville stuff before I started the channel, so it's all rereads, have less priority. But yeah, of course, I'll definitely go back to talking Mieville at some point, and I'll
all right.
Start with the usual stuff and do like Perdido Street Station, and then definitely read the Scar and Iron Council because I'm missing those two.
I'll admit I do like the Scar. Iron Council I don't think is as good, but again, just
I think that's the one where the Marxism comes through the most.
Yeah, that's definitely true. But yeah, no, I've enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah,
Definitely.
it's been a lot of fun.
If you wanna, we should do this again at some point.
Oh yeah, sure.
If you wanna share like your social media stuff, you can do that.
Well, it's Raf Blutaxt on YouTube. That's basically all I do. I sometimes use Twitter, but only very, very irresponsibly every couple of years, and beyond that, I don't have anything. So it's Raf Blutaxt, which means blood axe in German.
Oh, interesting.
And that's the channel on YouTube.
So, like, you don't you don't mind people knowing like your name's like Raphael or something like that?
No, I don't care.
Oh, okay.
It's
okay. I just wanted to be sure because I didn't want to go like Raphael from Raf Blutaxt.
Oh no, that's fine.
And you get, like,
it's actually like Raf
sent me
just
a-
turned out to be like the short version of Raphael, and everyone just
sent
called me
like a
Raf.
strongly worded message to my Discord, like, "What the fuck?" Thanks for coming on though. I appreciate you. We should do this again at some point.
Sure.
This was fun.
Yeah.
I hope you guys enjoyed this. I will be heading off now, so take care, everybody.
Yeah.
All right.